let's bring in Mitch Lawrence from SiriusXM NBA Radio to break it all down. And, oh, by the way, something Woj said last night that was quite interesting. We'll dive into that as well with Mitch Lawrence from SiriusXM NBA Radio as he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. And, Mitch, it was a wild one last night. I was up till about 12:45 with this draft last night. There was a lot of trading, a lot of movement, but now it sets up what could be a epic free agency season. How are you, pal?
Good. I gave up after the first round.
That's it. Out.
The NBA made a big mistake. The NBA's got to tighten it up and make it a shorter draft. It's a big mistake, especially this draft. It was a 3-player draft, and after the intrigue, after Kobe White gets passed over by 2 teams that need a point guard desperately, Minnesota and Phoenix, I'm like, what the hell are these teams doing? And Chicago lucked out getting him. But if you look at the study of the draft, and I've talked to people today, they're killing it as a terrible draft from like 7, 8 on down.
Yeah, and you know what? Well, it's funny. You said you left after the first round. The Sixers had 4 second-round picks, so I felt inclined to stay awake, but they got rid of them all. Oh, did they? Smart move. It's not a good. I've heard it's not a good draft. I mean, we'll see. It's always interesting to see how it plays out. But I was just fascinated. After Jean Morant, who goes obviously to, and he's considered the best point guard. It is a point guard league, as we know. If you don't have a big-time player at that position, you're behind the 8 ball. So you have these guys, Darius Garland and Kobe White, who everybody is, allegedly, saying these guys are going to be great point guards in the future. It's amazing to me that Cleveland took Garland, although I've since found out they're down on Colin Sexton apparently, and now they're selling it as we can have 2 guys in the backcourt. I think they'd like to get rid of Sexton from what I hear. And then this whole Kobe White thing is fascinating because Minnesota took Culver. They've got Jeff Teague. They're going nowhere with him. They need a Kobe White. And then Phoenix, who's been, they've been without a point guard since like Steve Nash, it seems, or at least, Isaiah Thomas and that whole thing with Eric Bledsoe. They tried to give you this, well, Ty Jerome's the point guard of the future. He ain't a point guard of anybody's future. I'm telling you, that's a mistake, and Phoenix should have taken Kobe White. So it's going to be interesting how to see. Now Kobe White and Darius Garland are playing in the same division, right? Chicago, Cleveland. They'll go up against each other, and we'll see what happens with Minnesota and Phoenix if they're looking for point guards starting like tomorrow. Yeah, there was a lot of interesting trades last night. It sets up an interesting free agency season now, and I don't know what we read from the draft and free agency, but let's start with Kawhi Leonard, who last night, Woj throws this out there, and he tries to tickle the Knicks and Sixers and Nets fans a little bit by saying, he might take a meeting with those teams. Any shot that he goes someplace other than Toronto or the Clippers? Should the Knicks, Sixers, and Nets fans have a little bit of anticipation here? Don't get your hopes up. People in San Diego at San Diego State think he's going to the Clippers. People with the Clippers hope he's going to the Clippers, and people in Toronto think he's staying. That's it. There's no hope for Philadelphia. There's no hope. I mean, Woj can tweet what he wants, and usually he's right on top of things. But I'm telling you right now, he might take meetings with teams. It's coming down to the Clippers and the Toronto Raptors. Yeah, and look, he's right to take these meetings, right? I mean, to bounce around and see what everybody's got, right? But he can if he wants. Right, I'm saying, but the teams that he meets with shouldn't get all that excited. Like last year, they were throwing out LeBron's going to meet with this team, and the Sixers got a chance late in the game, but realistically, he wasn't there. He wasn't
make
there.
It.
Yes,
they
exactly.
Spent, what Rich Paul and a cutout of LeBron. I mean, that was a waste of time. I could have told the Philly people, Josh Harris, don't waste your time. He ain't going there. So they took it, though. I guess it was a favor to Rich Paul because of Ben Simmons. Whatever. I mean, it just made no sense. We all knew LeBron was going to one place. He was leaving for Los Angeles. He was not going to Philadelphia. So, yeah, you can have all the meetings you want, but until you commit and you sign on the dotted line. And we know, basically you have a good idea where these guys, like LeBron last year, it was going to be Los Angeles. This time around, for Kawhi Leonard, it's going to be Toronto or the Clippers. Kevin Durant this time around, it looks like it's going to be the Knicks, not the Nets, or Golden State. Anybody who also takes a meeting with these, they might be wasting their time. They should move on to other free agents. Yeah, well, the Sixers have their own free agents with Butler and Harris, and they got to figure out what they're going to do. They only got 4 guys on the roster here, so they got to feel pretty confident about what these 2 guys are going to do. Otherwise, they could be left at the altar there. Well, it's funny. Talking to people around the league, a lot of people think that they might keep both guys. I mean, one of the things is, and you're hearing this a lot, If anybody offers Tobias Harris a max deal, they're nuts. You're not a max deal. He's not a max deal player. But there's so much money, Mike, going on. There's so many, max salary slots that are open. Will there be a team dumb enough to make a move like that? It would be great for Tobias Harris, don't get me wrong. But if somebody ponies up a max salary for a guy who's not considered a top-tier or second-tier free agent, that's a problem. That's a problem what you're going to do to your future salary cap. So we'll see how it all plays out. We'll see what happens in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and there's some thought out there that teams could make plays for Tobias to try to drive up the Sixers' price. You know what I mean? Like, hey, if they're going to offer that deal, we're going to have to do this. And, look, the Sixers, if they bring those two guys back and they bring the whole band back together, that salary, I mean, their team, the roster is going to be, in like I think I heard about the $500 million range. Is Josh Harris going to want to write that check?
Well, why did he become an NBA owner? That's the pain. You hear all these stories now about how Tillman Fertitta, who's in his second year, I think, as the Rockets owner, he's done all these cutbacks. Now he'll tell you I'm spending a ton of money on a $100 million practice facility, a new private jet for the team, whatever. But there are reports, he cuts people. It sounds like he cuts staffers. He fires people for Mike D'Antoni. He doesn't want to pay for D'Antoni. So, the question always is, once you buy an NBA team, that's great, but then you got to really ante up and you got to pay salaries and stuff. And the best teams usually do it. Look, I'm not saying it happens all the time. I remember back when LeBron was with Miami, Mike, and he had, there were certain guys he wanted to have on the team like Mike Miller, and there came a point where Mickey Arison, the owner, did not want Mike Miller around because he didn't want to pay a luxury tax for Mike Miller.
Yeah.
There's always going to be stuff like that. But in terms of getting your team set up with its main players, you got to be there. If you're an NBA owner and you pay billions of dollars for a team, you better be there now to pay the freight. Otherwise, it sends a bad message to your fans because your fans want to know if you're all in. They don't want you to be, skimping. They don't want you to be, we're going to cut corners on this. They want you to be the big investor. So we'll see what Josh Harris and his guys do. I have to think that they would, gladly pay these guys to stay because, look, if Kawhi Leonard leaves, you got, all right, that's a great thing for Philadelphia. That eliminates that team that you lost to in 7 games. You come back with the same team, you make some changes. Now you're more worried about the Bucks. You're not worried about the Celtics because the Celtics right now, we're examining the wreckage and the carnage of the Celtics, right?
More on them coming up with Mitch Lawrence. The Lakers. Now, they feel like they got Anthony Davis, and this thing is all peachy now. They got the guy that they wanted. They gave up a lot, but they didn't even get this right, it seems like.
Well, what they didn't get right was if you're going to trade a ton of assets for Anthony Davis, which is fine because Anthony Davis is better than anybody that David Griffin's going to draft probably down the road. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
I mean, if you had to look at it right now and say, would you rather have Anthony Davis or future picks for 2021, 23, 20? Anthony Davis is the player.
Always the player. I'll always take the player over because the thought process is if we're good, our picks are going to be in the late 20s anyway.
And here's the key. Unlike the Brooklyn trade for Garnett and Pierce, who were 36 and 37, Anthony Davis is 26 years old. That's the key to it. He has got, you could look up in 8-10 years, he'll still be playing for the Lakers, and he still might be very good. Who knows? He might be out. I mean, you don't know. But the figure is, the guy's 26 years old. Come on, he's got a lot of time left, right? So what you want to do here is now you got to make that trade. You have to make sure that you get that in return you have maximum salary cap space. They didn't do that, the Lakers. Instead of having $34 million, they might have $25 million. People are tweeting at me, what's the difference? It's a big difference. $10 million, $8 million, that's a big difference. That could represent a player. So that's a problem for the Lakers. But look, we're talking about a team where the GM, Rob Pelinka, is an agent who hasn't been in the job this long as a GM. And obviously he's a slow learner, and he needs help, and he doesn't have the right help around him. So it looks like on this trade, he got fleeced. Not quite a fleecing because he still gets Anthony Davis out of it, but David Griffin got a ton of stuff from him. Now, we'll see who the Lakers turn all this money into. Are they going to do the Laker? The obvious Laker thing is they'll try to get one guy like Kemba Walker or Jimmy Butler, who might not be a great fit with LeBron, or they'll waste their time with Kawhi Leonard. Okay? Or are they going to do what we think would be the prudent thing, the right thing, Mike, and that is to use that money for 2 or 3 players. Go get yourself J.J. Redick, or go get yourself Danny Green, or go get yourself Patrick Beverley. Bring in 3 players that you need, especially in your backcourt, who can help you more than the one player.
Do you think that players at this stage want to, like, hey, I'm JJ Redick. I want to go play with LeBron. I'm at the end of not at the end, but I mean, hey, I only got a couple of good years. Like, is he still the attractive draw, the Lakers and LeBron? It seems that they should be able to get mid-level veterans that can still play to go piece that thing out.
I think if you're a veteran player, you haven't won, you haven't go. Look, if you're let's say you're Kemba Walker, okay? Let's say that Charlotte offers you even more money, but you have a chance to play with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. What are you kidding me? Michael, what is Michael Jordan offering you to stay other than maybe some more money? And I'm not making this like he's going to leave $80 million on the table. Let's say they're fairly close. Okay, Jordan doesn't want to pay him the max. The Lakers are going to give him a ton. To me, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to play with LeBron James if I haven't won. I mean, Kemba Walker hasn't gotten out of a first round. Now, for other down-the-line free agents, I think it depends on who you are, how old you are,
right,
where you are in your career, et cetera, et cetera. If I'm Jimmy Butler, maybe I don't want to be with LeBron James and Anthony Davis now. Why? You might not see the ball as much as you want to. Maybe you want to stay in Philadelphia where you can still get a lot of shots up. So, I think it's a case-by-case case, but I would think that the Lakers, I can't not believe that there wouldn't be guys who are like, I can't. Now, Kyrie Irving doesn't want to play with LeBron James. We know that. But there are other guys, I don't think hey, if you're a third or fourth option, you have a chance to win a title. You haven't won before. You haven't gotten deep in the playoffs. And you can play with the Los Angeles Lakers. We're not asking you to go play in Cleveland, right? We're asking, I mean, come on.
Right, you're playing with the Lakers here. What do the Knicks do now, man? I mean, this is interesting because this whole Durant, I've heard a lot of, hey, get Durant, have him sit out, tank again, then you get Barrett, Durant, and another player. So what's the blueprint for New York?
Not really tanking. It's like you're building with young guys like R.J. Barrett and Kevin Knox. I mean, you could argue it's tanking. I'm arguing it's just like you're not very good anyway. But here's the thing. The Knicks, James Dolan, the owner, I think that he is the type of guy who looks at celebrities coming to Madison Square Garden, who looks like a guy like Kevin Durant and says, I could have one of the top players in the game. Yes, he's going to have to sit out a season. I can live with that. I'll have him instead of 4 years, for at least 3 years, maybe after that, we'll be able to re-sign him. And you still have a guy who is considered, we'll see what he is off the Achilles, but right now, James Dolan and the Knicks, I'm sure, would love to have. They would be at the front of the line to offer Kevin Durant the maximum money down to the penny to try to get him out of Golden State. That's how bad they've been, Mike, over the last 20-odd years. These guys like Kevin Durant, first of all, there is this thought that Kevin Durant actually wants to play in New York. How many guys are like that? LeBron James never wanted to play in New York. He loved coming to New York to play against the Knicks. Kobe Bryant didn't want to play for the Knicks. He loved coming to the Garden to play in what he called the Mecca. Kevin Durant actually, he has sent out signals through his business guy Kleiman that he wants to play in New York. There aren't a lot of guys like that, and there aren't a lot of players of his talent. Of course the Knicks would love to have.
Now, what about the number 2 teams in those towns, the Clippers and the Nets? If they don't get Kawhi or if they don't get the heavy hitters, are they still players in free agency, or do those franchises have too much of that number 2 stigmatism?
That's a good question. They both are way down the line. And they're both on better. If you look at it, I mean, if you're a smart basketball player, you're like, I'd rather play in Brooklyn. I'd rather, especially Brooklyn, over the Knicks because the Knicks are dysfunctional and the Nets are at least they know what they're doing culture-wise. And the Clippers, I mean, they're always fighting an uphill battle in Los Angeles against the Lakers. So I don't know it'd be interesting to see what the plan B for the Clippers is. They're nervous about Kawhi because, you know what, I think they know that Toronto's did as much as they could to keep him, and that's now tough competition. They much rather have seen somebody else come out of the East to make Kawhi's decision at least easier in terms of winning. And in terms of Brooklyn, they are now, they're looking at Kyrie Irving, but there's, I think, some skepticism within that organization about, if you take on Kyrie, he can't be your leader and he can't be your number one guy. Just checked out what happened in Boston this past season. That was an unmitigated disaster. And now, do we want to bring him in as a solo act and basically risk the repeat of that, or do we have a shot at Kevin Durant? I really don't know if Kevin Durant, he might want to play with Kyrie Irving. I just don't know if Kevin Durant's idea of coming to New York is playing in Brooklyn. I think his idea of playing in New York is playing in the Garden.
Mitch Lawrence is our guest here from SiriusXM NBA Radio Sporting News. Forbes, longtime NBA columnist, here talking a little NBA as now the draft sets up free agency, which, all right, you mentioned Boston before. Kyrie, it seems like he's as good as gone. Now Al Horford seemingly is getting out of there too. Yeah. Are they going to turn this team over to Tatum, or is Ainge going to have to figure out a way to get a bigger name in there?
Well, I'll tell you what, Danny Ainge, boy, he ain't looking great these days. And it's amazing, isn't it? When Al Horford, a player like Al Horford, walks away from, $30 million the last year of his contract, he's got another deal somewhere. And a lot of people think it's the Clippers. Some people think it's Dallas. I know Utah probably has interest, so then now with Mike Conley, they'd have to make some moves to get more money for him, but he'd be perfect with any of those teams, especially the Clippers, because if the Clippers could sell Kawhi on, hey, we can have you, Al Horford, and some of our young guys, that might be enough to tip the scales in their favor. And Dallas, he would look great next to, we'll see what Porzingis looks like. He's expected back on the court. But they need a veteran-type guy down there for Rick Carlisle with Doncic, and the guys he has. And then obviously Utah, he fit in perfectly with Gobert and now Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley Jr. In terms of what they're leaving behind in Boston, he and Kyrie, I'm telling you, this is a big blow to Danny Ainge because Danny Ainge is viewed upon by a lot of people as a top executive, but lately his moves have been backfiring. His draft last night, I had people texting me, scouts, like, Danny Ainge is putting together a nice bench. He's getting nobody. This Romeo Langford guy and other players are just looked at as bench pieces, and they're losing. The problem is here, when you lose a Kyrie Irving, talent-wise, that's a major step back. And you don't get that in a draft unless you're getting another, a number one overall pick like a Zion Williamson, potentially. So how do you replace Kyrie Irving? That's the problem for Danny Ainge. He's got to replace his best, most talented player, a real difference maker, and a guy like Al Horford, who's a big-time leader for him in that locker room, leaving behind a lot of, young guys, second, maybe third options at best. And, what do you have there? A 45, 48-win team? Big problems in Boston, Mike.
Mitch, Pelicans, they got Zion. They're all over the place. They're the new fun, hot team when you got a guy like that. But Holiday, Ball, Ingram, are they going to be a good team?
Well, I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. They'll be a team on the rise. They've got to make other moves. I mean, the guys they got from the Lakers – we talked about it already, how the Lakers definitely got, Anthony Davis is an MVP quality type player when he stays healthy. First team All-NBA, I think, 3 times. And they get in return the guys who can play. Ingram's coming off a blood clot issue. And although he's had some moments in his 3 years, I'm not going to say he's an all-star. He might be a starting player. Fine, great. He's got deficiencies in his game. Lonzo Ball can't stay on the court. I could not believe heading into the draft, Mike, where you heard, boy, the Bulls really have an interest in Lonzo Ball. Based on what? Mm-hmm. He's always hurt and he can't shoot.
Yeah.
That to me, that's where they're big winners. I'd much rather have Kobe White, right, versus Lonzo Ball. Because I've seen Lonzo Ball. If Lonzo Ball can't stay on the court, that's no good. That does me no good. And so those were the main players they got. I know they got hard too. And, they got Zion Williamson. They got Drew Holiday. I don't know what they're going to do with Julius Randle. In the Western Conference, that ain't good enough to make the playoffs. I don't think. No, I really don't.
Yeah,
so
I think
this is still going to be David Griffin has done a good job. He's got a lot of assets. He's assembling. He saw what he did with the Atlanta thing. That's fine. But what he's got to do is he's got to make the right picks for these guys. And you know what? Here's the other thing about New Orleans. Never eat. Now, you'll get some free agents if you overpay like they did in the past, and that's what I got him in trouble with guys like Solomon Hill. But in terms of top players, that is not a destination for NBA players.
No, it's not. And, Mitch, but for the first time in, I don't know, you had this 5-year run by the Warriors. You had the LeBron teams in the Eastern side anyway. Does this feel as wide open as ever that we're going to see teams that there's going to be GMs out there thinking they could be the next Toronto Raptors, Masai Ujiri, and pull the trigger, spend stupid money, do whatever I got to do because the window's now?
Of course. That's why you always hear that Houston would be interested in Jimmy Butler. I don't know how they could do that. They'd have to move Chris Paul. They're not going to move Chris Paul, I don't think. But, yeah, I think especially in the West where Golden State has hit a stranglehold on the Western Conference, and without Klay Thompson for at least a good part of next year, and maybe we've seen the last of Kevin Durant there, that knocks them down considerably, even though they come back with Curry and, Draymond Green. Look, they're more vulnerable than ever. And I think there are going to be GMs who, exactly like you say, and owners who are going to say, like here's the funny thing. Houston went into the offseason after losing to Golden State, and we were all talking about how, Houston is running up against Golden State in the playoffs, and this is a thing that's never going to change, and they're always going to lose to them, just like Toronto always lost to Cleveland in the East. Now what happens? Now Golden State looks like they're the most vulnerable. If if they were all together, they've got so many problems with Mike D'Antoni now and ownership not being on the same page. They've got problems with Harden and Paul, obviously. Now you're looking at it like, well, can you imagine if these guys had their act together and they were all on the same page? Then you would say, my God, this would be exactly what Toronto finally did. They got Kawhi, but this is like the thing of, they could now make their move in the West, and maybe the window is reopened for Houston. But it looks like they got too much internal stuff happening right now, even though it's just June. We'll see how it plays out. But, I think their teams are looking at it going, you know what, this is the year we can win it.
I'll leave you with this, Mitch, because the other day I was talking with my midday show guys, and they ripped me because – now, I didn't say I thought Mike Conley was better than Jimmy Butler. I just said I would almost rather pay him for 2 years and know that I'm out of that deal after 2 years than give Jimmy Butler 5 years and know I have – because you mentioned Chris Paul, and every time I think of that contract, it makes me nauseous. And the Butler deal, you're going to be paying him $40+ million when he's 35 years old. I would almost rather have just said, hey, I would take 2 years of Mike Conley and get out of that deal than have to pay Butler for 5.
Well, first of all, you're talking about two different positions and two wildly different personalities.
Yes.
Mike Conley is a team guy who's not about – now, I know Jimmy Butler's a team guy, but Jimmy Butler throws bombs at people in his own locker room. Mike Conley Jr. doesn't do that. Mike Conley Jr. is a consummate pro. Now, Jimmy Butler, he'd say he's a consummate pro too because he tends to – motivate people in different ways than Mike Conley, but they play different positions. I mean, look, if you're Utah, here's the other situation you got to always look at. They can't get top guys out there as free agents. They have to make trades for them. That's the type of market they're in. Talk about destinations, they're not a destination either. So I like what they did. Plus, they needed an offense, Mike. I mean, look.
You talk about Utah.
Yeah, right, exactly. The Utah started 3 guys last year who you really didn't have to guard. Ricky Rubio, Derek Favors, and Gobert. When I say don't guard, they're not scoring threats like this guy can get me 20 points a night. You know what they are? They're limited. In this day and age where 3/5 of your starting lineup are like that, really? That's why they had to make upgrades. That's why they got Mike Conley. Gobert's still a problem. He can only do certain things offensively for you. Derek Favors still a problem. To me, everybody's now going overboard on Utah. I do like the Mike Conley move. Don't say I like Mike Conley a lot. And, yeah, you're right. He makes a lot of money. But to me, they still get into problems where they're going to have to score and find different scoring options, especially people who can beat you off the bounce. And sometimes Mike Conley has problems with injuries, so we'll see how that plays out. But I tended to agree with you more, and I don't think anybody's going to give Jimmy Butler the full 5 years. I can't believe that because I think they all fear he's got some tread worn off that tire.
He's Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio. When can our listeners tune into you next there, Mitch?
Actually, tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. on NBA, the NBA show, 7 a.m., 10 a.m., channel 207, tomorrow morning, starting right off the bat.
I like it. At Mitch_Lawrence. Wake up with Mitch tomorrow, 7 o'clock, SiriusXM NBA Radio. Thanks, pal.
Thank you, Mike. See ya.
Mitch Lawrence, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.